So why are you combining Vedic astrology, which is centered around the cycles of the moon, with Western planets, which are not used in Vedic astrology?
The reason it takes the moon into more consideration is simply because it's closer to the earth and it has more of an amplification effect. So I've taken a very different approach to astrology that most astrologers do, in that I don't like to do prediction. I like to teach you about yourself. I don't predict, but what I do is I say there's a probability of X, Y, and Z happening, and it's up to you to double down on them or to mitigate.
When does the life of a person actually begin? Is it when the cord is cut? Is it when they come out of the mother's belly? When does it begin?
The way I've always done it is...
My guest today is someone who has pioneered his own unique style of yoga, using it to cure himself of cancer and blending traditional Indian practices with modern influences, including hip-hop dance. Teaching yoga and meditation, he's worked with the likes of HSBC Bank, Nike, ASOS, the British Army, British Navy, and the UK Parliament, and has been featured in media such as the BBC, Sky TV, Cosmopolitan, and others. Neil Patel is the creator of Chikri Yoga and the founder of the Chikri School of Yoga. Passionate about physical and spiritual well-being, he's an accomplished author of Anger is Blocked Love, What is Disease, and 10 Principles of Perfect Eating. In this conversation, we dive deep into Neil's knowledge of Vedic astrology and how he combines it with Western planets to get an incisive view of a person's psychology and to predict upcoming events. Namaste, Neil. Thank you so much for joining me today. We've just done a conversation for my YouTube show, and we focused on a number of things in that one, but I want to talk to you today about Vedic astrology. Now, I know you combine Vedic astrology with Western planets, or rather, they're not necessarily Western planets, but planets that are used in Western astrology, but not used in Vedic astrology.
Yeah.
Before we go there, can you just bring us up to speed with your journey into Vedic astrology and Western astrology? How did that begin? Where are you at now?
Well, obviously, being a yoga teacher of, 34 years or something now, yoga, Jyotish, Ayurveda are all sister and brother subjects.
Jyotish meaning Vedic astrology.
Meaning Vedic
Indian
astrology. Indian astrology are all
the astrology of, or rather the science of light.
The science of light, yeah, actually the science of light. They're all connected subjects. Once you learn about one, you tend to start learning about the other one as well. And it's said in India that a true rishi or sage or person that is a scholar of these subjects knows all three. You need to know about Jyotisha, Vedic astrology. You need to know about Ayurveda, the science of diet and how we combine ourselves with nature in the most effective way, and yoga, the science of spiritual reunification with the source. So I always had astrology in my radar, Vedic astrology in my radar. But then when we went through lockdown and we saw the dramatic effect that something was having on our earth, I decided to look into it a lot more. And actually what's interesting is I started to look into the Western side of it a bit more, because I was piqued my interest by a Western astrologer called Dr. Michael Lennox, who's a great guy, a great Western astrologer. And the way he approached astrology I liked the way he approached it, because he really made it interesting and effective. So what I did was I contacted him and did a couple of training courses with him, qualified with him. He mentored me for a few years after that and really looked after my development. And then I combined that with what I knew about Vedic astrology already, done a bit more brushing up on my understanding, and then began my practice. So that's how I got into it.
Amazing. So why are you combining Vedic astrology, which is based on centered around the cycles of the moon and goes very deep into the relationship with the moon that we have as individuals, with Western planets, which are not used in Vedic astrology? And which planets do you use?
Yeah, so Vedic astrology does take into consideration the moon, but also the sun, considered to be important as well, because the sun is the center of our solar system.
The soul.
Yeah, and it's Ravi, Lord Surya, which is a very powerful being. The reason it takes the moon into more consideration is simply because it's closer to the earth and it has more of an amplification effect. And the planets that I've taken into the Vedic astrological system are Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. which I've derived their understanding of from Western astrology, but have noticed through my practices over the years that they are very, very effective and accurate as to what they present in when you put them to Vedic calculations.
For psychology or for prediction?
For both. For both. For psychology, for the makeup of the human being, but also for events in the future.
But you use Chiron as well. And you use Chiron and the Lilith, the black moon Lilith.
So Chiron
and
is
part of fortune.
Yeah. So Chiron is from Greek mythology and Greek astrology. And it's also an extremely effective one for looking at the wounds that you go through in life and your healing process out of them. So you can pick up on healers and people that are going through struggles from where Chiron is placed. And he's very interesting. The black moon Lilith is the like the female uprising energy, the Kali energy, where someone who has been disenfranchised or disempowered, where they are kicking that energy back up from and how it will show up in their lives. That's the black moon Lilith. And we use the vertex as well, which shows about the fated entrance, fated partners, or the fated guru, where they will appear in your life. And that's been extremely accurate. So I've brought in part of fortune from Arabic astrology, which explains where you're likely to get normally your material
success. Is that Arabic or Tajik?
I'm not sure. I think it's Arabic.
Yeah.
But it explains where you're likely to achieve your fortune and your success. And as I said, through all the charts that I've done for people, they've been very accurate. So I continue to use them. But I do use Vedic calculations.
Sidereal.
Yeah.
Sidereal calculations.
Correct.
Just the Western, some of these planets which we don't give too much importance to, and the outer planets rather, most of the time, the Pluto and Uranus and Neptune. Although Neptune does tend to have a role. Neptune has a role to play. I think it's not that much of an outer planet. I often hear people talking about it in Vedic astrology.
Yeah.
Beautiful. So how do you use astrology? Do you use it mainly? I'm fascinated by it, and I've been as a Joshi, it's in my lineage, and it's something that I have spent it's like what I call my guilty pleasure, because I won't admit to people that I actually do this.
Yeah.
But I've, for many, many years, I think probably 35 years or something, I started with Western, then came to Vedic, because I thought Vedic was too complicated. And now I can really go very, very deep into it. And one of the things that fascinates me about the Vedic astrology is that, when it's based like there are layers. So every planet has a representation. Every planet represents the karak for something. It's called a karak. Represents certain aspects of life, of a person, etc., etc. And then we have the moon, which is the cycles of the moon, which then travels around the nakshatras. We call them asterisms in English, right? Star constellations and so on. And then they give another layer of exposure to or illuminating aspects of a person's life and predictions and so on. How do you use astrology for predictions, for looking at a person's karma, character, where are they going? Tell me how you actually use it as a tool.
Well, I tend to use the Atma Yantra style of astrology, which is when you take into account, and this is what Parashara really recommended as well, was always looking at the D60 chart, which is the Shashtiamsha, the past life chart.
So just for people that don't know, Rishi Parashara, Sage Parashara, he is credited with being the inventor. All the knowledge we have of Jyotish, that is the Indian astrology, is sort of coming from him, and then through his son Jaimini, and so on and so on. And there are some Brigu and so on. There are other sages.
And actually, just very quickly, Parashara's father was Sukhi, and his father was Sage Vashishta.
Yeah.
And Sage Vashishta was a Prajapati, who was a mind son of Lord Brahma.
Yes.
Right? And
he's one of the seven Saptarishis, the seven rishis, the seven sages.
So actually,
with whom we have all the knowledge.
Yeah, so astrology actually comes directly from the source of Lord Brahma, who is obviously from Lord Vishnu, and Lord Vishnu from Brahman. So it's actually a godly subject in the lineage. So yeah, how I use it is that I use the Atma Yantra, which is the soul journey, right? So the first thing that I will do is look at a person's D60 chart, which is their Shashtiamsha.
The first thing you'll do, not D1, not the actual Rashi chart.
No,
the first
you're
chart.
not supposed to look at the Rashi first. You're supposed to look at the D60 first.
Where they've come from.
Where they've come from.
Ah.
Exactly. That's the yantra. That's the journey, right? So I look at where they've come from. So that tells me what they were doing in their past life, right? So once I've studied that, which is about 60% of my attention, is understanding who they are. Then the next chart I look at is the Navamsha, which is the D9, which I call their astral chart. This is what I call it, because I look at it as the chart which the gods have given just before they took birth to say, this is where you're going to learn. This is where you can have your fortune, your success. This is what you're supposed to go through to find your purpose. It's where you really will find your light is in your Navamsha. So I look at the Navamsha as the farewell gift from the gods before you take birth.
So just to clarify for people, because, we're going into the depths of astrology here, Vedic astrology now, right? And Navamsha, Shashtiamsha, D9, D60, D1. So just to kind of set the context, is that this is another layer of how Vedic astrology works, is that it breaks down various houses into its parts. It's a bit like drilling down the chart, the original birth chart, we call it Rashi chart, and you open it up and you kind of do a surgical dive into the depths of each of the houses. And D9 is the house that relates to the ninth house, which is the house of fortune and hopefully future lives as well. And then Shashtiamsha, which is a D60, which is what Neil's referring to, which is the one which goes into incredible depth, not just about past lives, but also future lives. Yeah. And what you do between the past and the future is shown through the D1, the birth chart, and the various other elements, the D9 and so on and so on.
So I will look at the past life, then I'll look at the astral chart, which tells about just before you were born and your fortune. And then finally, I'll look at your natal chart. So this is what everybody will understand is your birth chart, right? And your birth chart will basically be what the universe gives to you as you kick off for your life. So the first reading I'll do for someone is nothing about their predictions. It's all about who they are and what they're supposed to be doing and what karmas they'll have, what blessings they'll have, what skills they'll have, what past relationships were like, what they're likely to do this time. So I'll get a very strong picture. And normally, to be honest with you, after I've done that with someone, which takes about an hour and a half, they don't need anything else because they've understood who they are and where they've come from. And it informs them enough about decisions that they can then make in the future with their own free will. So I've taken a very different approach to astrology that most astrologers do, in that I don't like to do predictions. I like to teach you about yourself. Now, if somebody comes back to me and says, okay, now let's look at the future, then I don't predict, but what I do is I say there's a propensity, there's a likelihood, there's a probability, there's higher and higher chances of X, Y, and Z happening, and it's up to you to double down on them or to mitigate them. Still, is it your free will? Everything is in your hands still. So I'm a new school of astrologer that doesn't like to tell people what's going to happen. I say, no, that's always your choice. But what's likely is this.
Beautiful. So guidance by helping people understand their nature, their actual makeup, coming from the past, and how much of that might be fixed, because we can see fixed karma from these things, right? The sixth, the eighth, and the 12th house can very clearly show you there are certain things you're not going to escape. Then there are other things which you can shape, which you can direct, which you can alter. And you were talking about this in the other conversation we had for YouTube, which is that, how much free will do we have actually versus, what we've already cast as momentum through our previous, the previous seeds that we've sown in previous incarnations, perhaps in previous thoughts, and deep enough that they have no other thing to do but to come to fruition.
Yeah.
But to come to fruition.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I will never put somebody in a position where they have no choice. and no ability to change.
And people do. And people have choice.
Well, they do. And so they can change anything that's on their chart. Whatever is there, they can either double down it or they can walk away from it. So you have to have that. You have to respect people. We're not living in Kali Yuga anymore, where people would just had no idea what was going on and they needed direction on everything.
We're not living in Kali Yuga anymore.
We're now in Dwapara
Kali Yuga
Yuga.
being the time that has been said in the Vedic wisdom of being the time of period of darkness.
Yeah, so we're now in Dwapara Yuga, where people are discovering a lot more. Yoga is coming out. Spirituality is spreading like wildfire across the world. We're coming out of the dark ages. So you have to treat people with a lot more respect. And so that's why with my clients, I'll have it's more like a conversation now with astrology. Look, this is what's happening. I always show them their own chart. I take them online on Zoom. They see their chart. We talk about it. And then we help them to make a decision if they want to do it with me involved. So it's different now.
What aspects of Vedic astrology do you particularly use?
I use those.
You talked about the charts. You talked about the divisional charts, the D9, the D60, and the D1. What else do you use from that system? Because there's so many tools.
You have to be very picky and be careful what you look at. The next thing that I'll do is I'll always check people's dashas. The dashas are their planetary periods. Yeah. So what planet is governing their next 5, 10, 15, 17, 18 years? That's really important. And then I look at their antradasha, which is the sub-period within that, what sub-planet is looking after them. So I get a flavor and a tone and a feel of their current journey. So that helps to inform what I'm looking at. And then I will look at, normally by that time, and then you start to look at your transits, of course, what's happening in the future.
Right now.
And what and you can drill down into dates and times and minutes that you need to look at. Then you check all the karakas, how they're working.
The planets, what they represent, and how prominent they are right now in your chart.
Yeah. So normally, once you've gone through a couple of other vargas, you can look at the D30 about what experiences they're going to have to go through in their life. The D10 for their jobs.
The D30 represents what?
Their karma, the stuff that they have to go through.
To do with the parents, right? To do with paternal family.
D30 to do with
that's
fortune.
That's the 12th division.
To do with their fortune. Things that are going to go struggle, their misfortune actually. And the D10 a little bit about work. But once you've put all that together, then you've had the conversation with them, then that's where we leave it. I try not to overimpose myself.
And how do you use the nakshatras, the moon constellations of the moon that we have, that are 27, which then further divided or refined into 108 stages or padas or steps? Charan,
the nakshatras work in tandem with our zodiac as well, which is good. The Western zodiac and the nakshatras can be placed next to each other and make sense. For example, Leo, the Western zodiac sign of Leo, has got Magha nakshatra attached to it. And they both have very similar qualities. Leo and Magha nakshatra will have very similar qualities. So as you go around the 12 zodiacs, the nakshatras will sit with them and give more detail.
But in Leo, they never talk about Purva Falguni, which is the next one, and the Uttar Falguni, which is these are the names of the nakshatras. And there are typically 3 nakshatras per sign. But at the same time, if you look at the qualities of Purva Falguni, which is about ruled by Venus, so it's very much about the showgirl or the showman or somebody who wants to be on stage. And Leo is all about creativity. Magha's more about ancestors and what you bring from your lineage. Stuff like that. But
it gives you more detail.
But Western astrology, does it give you that level of detail?
No, Western astrology is a bit more broader. It's a lot easier to understand and work with because it's a lot more simplified, and which is nice. So therefore, that's why I use the Vedic, because the Vedic will give you a lot more detail, a lot more control over what's happening in that particular degree of Leo. So in Western astrology, if you're born as a Leo, that's it, whether it's the 1st degree of Leo or the 30th degree of Leo around the chart. But with Vedic astrology, it's a very big difference between the 5th degree of Leo and the 25th degree of Leo, because it will hit a different nakshatra, which is, like you said, the lunar mansion. which is, in simple terms, is 27 nakshatras. The moon will hit 27, 28 points, days around the month, and it will amplify a certain section of the universe onto you, onto the earth. So when a human being is born, in Vedic astrology, we'll look at where their moon is, because it will be amplifying that slither of the universe and all the constellations that are beyond that, and all the further stars that are beyond that, and beyond even the constellation of Leo, further deeper, and shine them onto you. So at that point, you're getting a much more detailed understanding of what's being caked into you at birth. And if you go further than the nakshatra, then as you were saying, you get into the padas, of which there are 4 for every nakshatra, and those padas will give you even more detail on the individual.
Drill down, more specifics.
Even more specific detail on. And each of them is ruled by a different planet. So it can get incredibly deep.
And deities. So now you could go another layer down, and you can actually look at more specifics. For example, like, I don't know whether you use this, but for example, every nakshatra, every lunar mansion has its own ruler, which is presided over by a certain deity.
Yeah.
And there's a story, the purpose behind that deity and what that deity represents and so on, which becomes very much a part of your own journey.
Yeah.
Life purpose, in a sense. If you really want to look at life purpose, you want to look at the myths around that, the associations around that.
Yeah, you can do that as well. Padas are really underestimated, the power of the pada, as we were mentioning earlier, because there is an energy coming through that pada at the time that you're born, which is a sound that comes to you. And that sound is humming from the universe. And as soon as you enter the earth, when you're born, that sound almost paints over you in a cosmic sense with a vibration.
Is that how we named babies?
And
based on the moment they're born, where the moon is, and which rashi or which sign they're in, and which nakshatra they're in.
Yeah,
is that where that comes from?
Which pada they're in. The pada informs the nakshatra, which goes into the zodiac sign, which goes into the moon, and then that goes into the child.
So like the belongs to mean rashi, for example. That's the Pisces. That's the sound for the Pisces.
Yeah. So when the baby's born, they'll get named after the sound that was coming through to them at the time of birth. So whenever they hear their name, they will always be taken back to that default factory setting and cleansed of any crinkles and creases in their energy at that point, every time they hear their name.
What happens if you're not named after your rashi?
Then you'll take on characteristics from the name that you've been given.
No kidding.
Yeah, 100%.
Oh, wow.
So you'll find that if you...
good or evil, whatever.
Yeah. You'll find that if you are named under... So I was named under a Scorpio zodiac. I think...
I can get you. I could get that.
Yeah, I got a Scorpio name, but I was actually... My moon was in Sagittarius.
So my moon is in Revati, which is in
Pisces,
the Pisces, and I've been named after some sounds that go with Aquarius.
Yeah, so you'll end up having Aquarian qualities, technology.
Yeah, technology, astrology, all these things.
Yeah. Aquarius will come into, and community work is Aquarius as well. So that will start to play a part in you. So it's very important. But if you're not named under your particular pada, then you can still have a nickname. You can find out what your pada's name is, sound is, and you can name your business or your nickname or a pet name, something where you'll hear it regularly. And if you hear it regularly, it will still have the same effect.
That vibration is still there.
And each pada will relate to a chakra as well. Because all of the chakras have got petals and they all have sounds.
Yes.
And those sounds are also the same sounds as in the nakshatras. So every time you hear your correct pada, it will affect your energy system as well.
Amazing. Tell me about the D60, because I really would love to know.
Chart.
It is so little talked about, right? The D60 chart, the Shashtiamsha. Shashtiamsha means the 60th part of that chart. So therefore D60, division 60.
Well, when I do a reading of the Shashtiamsha chart, the first thing I actually do is go to the 12th house. I start at the 12th house of the Shashtiamsha.
Why?
So the 12th house is what your dying thoughts were and your dying wishes were, what state you were in at the end of your last life.
That propels you into the next existence.
Right? And that 12th house is always 100% accurate to what the person has come in with. Some tendencies, some karma, some patterns will always be drawn in from that 12th house. So I spend most of my attention on what's happening in your 12th house, what's the planetary ruler of it, and I drill down into that house 100%. And then I will look at the first house, because that will be about what you did in your life, so on your personality traits. And then I will look at the relationship house, the 7th house, and that will determine the types of relationships you're going to have in this lifetime, what you experienced. So then you just look at it like a normal chart, but the 12th house is the most important one there.
And where do you see the future from there then? Where do you see the future life? Because D60, the Shashtiamsha, is said to actually show what's happening after this one, after this lifetime.
The only way that I assert that is from your tendencies, because if your tendencies there are the same as the ones in your first house, then that becomes a strong pattern. Or if they're broken, so if one is debilitated and one is exalted, then it means you're going to break that pattern.
Right.
If it's debilitated, then you know that's going to push forward into your future.
That's going to be something you have to continue to work on.
It's a very strong pattern that's unlikely to change.
Very interesting.
So you've got to look at the state of the houses as well. But look, Vedic astrology is incredibly detailed. Horoscope astrology is horrible astrology, I call it.
I agree with you.
It's just no point opening up
given
your
it's
newspaper.
such a bad name.
There's no point, because most of the time in Western astrology, you're 24 degrees out anyway.
23,
nearly 24 degrees out now. So, because it changes, right, every year. So it's not even accurate for most people. And then you're reading about one point in a chart, whereas I look at 20 points in your chart. So real astrology is looking at the entire chart and then understanding what it means as a composite image. Right? Not looking at one point and thinking that's your whole being, because your sun is your soul. Your sun is actually the deepest part of you. It's the part that doesn't show up that much. It's the part that only shows up when push comes to shove. That's why in Vedic astrology, they look at the moon, because your moon is your subconscious, emotional, softer side, which comes out very quickly beneath the surface. So it looks at the moon. And then you've got your rising sign, which is rising up from the east, which is how you are on the surface. So if you take out the moon, you take out the rising sign, and you're just looking at the sun, that's hardly you anyway. That's you at your core.
Wait, so one of the most important things then with the Shashtiamsha, because it's such a refined division, the time of birth must be accurate.
Very accurate, yeah.
So
you need to have, some people will say to the second, to the minute. All I allow is 2 minutes either side of the time. And from the way I've looked at it, it's still reasonable.
Because the Shashtiamsha works on a 2-minute difference, doesn't it?
Yeah, but some people say it's a minute. Some people there's not a
exact
consensus on it. But the more accurate, the better.
Because I think the D9 is maybe 2 hours.
It's less than that even. I think it's a bit less than that.
Yeah. So
you want to get it accurate. So you want to get your D60. You need to know your time of birth. So the takeaway from this is, if you're having a child, be there as soon as it takes its first breath. Then
that's when you determine when the life begins, on the first breath. Yeah, so when they cut the cord.
Yeah, at that point, it will be within a few seconds of.
Because there is debate around that, isn't there? When does the life of a person actually begin? Is it when the cord is cut? Is it when they come out of the mother's belly? When does it begin?
The way I've always done it is, it's when you breathe. Because then you wake up your chakras, you wake up you're independent. You're independent, you're breathing for yourself, you're sustaining for yourself, you cry, you make a noise, you've arrived. The universe notices you. That's how I look at it.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Any last words of wisdom on the charts?
Yeah, just get your charts done. It's so important to have your chart done at some point in your life and have it done accurately and properly, and do the Atma Yantra. Look at the past before you look at the future. If you don't know where you came from, you don't know where you're going.
Beautiful. This is just so fascinating. Yeah. Again, as I say, Vedic astrology is my guilty pleasure. We haven't even started,
We haven't
I feel.
even started.
Yeah, I mean, Vedic astrology is definitely my guilty pleasure. And I'm so grateful it's so much fun to have this conversation with you. Thank you so much. Namaste. And
Namaste,
we will have you
thank
back
you.
in to talk about some of this again, I'm sure.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much, Smita.
Thank you.